Hi, we are starting a new chapter now. It's on multi-dimensional arrays. We have already seen how a single dimensional array can be used for writing some interesting programs. Let's look at the scenarios where we might need a multi-dimensional array. Let's start with a simple case like two-dimensional array. How we represent a two-dimensional array, and what are the types of programs in which we might need two-dimensional arrays. So let's look at the example here. You are looking at a distance table. So in this distance table, we have the distance between different cities. These are some 7 cities, Chicago to Houston, and we have found the distance between each city and each pair of city, and which is represented in this table. So if you have to store this kind of information in your program, then you will have to use a two-dimensional array. Similarly, if you are working on any problem that involves matrix manipulation, like matrix multiplication, matrix addition, subtraction, so for that also you'll have to represent a matrix using a two-dimensional array. So there can be many other applications also where you will need multi-dimensional arrays. So let's look at the representation, like how can we represent a two-dimensional array in our Java program. So pay attention to the way we will declare a two-dimensional array. So in the one-dimensional array, so far we have been using just one square bracket, whereas in two-dimensional arrays, since we will have 2 dimensions, you should pay attention to the fact that here we are using 2 square brackets in place of just one square bracket, as we had done in one-dimensional array. So if you have to declare a two-dimensional array, then you should start with a data type, then one pair of square bracket and another pair of square bracket, then the name of the array that you have. That's how you will declare a two-dimensional array. And then when you have to create that two-dimensional array, then you will have to say your variable name, which is ref_var. Then you will say equal to new data type, and now you should specify the size of the 2 dimensions. So in the first square brackets you will be writing 10, which here is the number of rows, and then in the next pair of square brackets you will write 10 again. So in this example we are creating a 10 by 10 two-dimensional array. So that's how you have to declare it. So this is very similar to the way we have done it in case of one-dimensional array, but since it is two-dimensional now, so we have to add another dimension here. Okay, so that's how we will take care of it. So let's look at some examples to improve our understanding. Now if we have to create a two-dimensional array that we are calling as matrix, and it is a two-dimensional array which will hold integers, and we know that its size should be 10 by 10, then that's how we should be doing it. Int square bracket name of the variable that we have, we are calling it matrix, is equal to new int 10 in the first square brackets, 10 again. So that means we are creating a two-dimensional array which we are calling as matrix, and its dimension is 10 rows and 10 columns. So this first line is the one that we will prefer using, whereas it is also possible to declare a two-dimensional array following this kind of notation, where the square brackets are coming after the name of the array. This is something which was used in earlier programming language like C and C++, but in Java I'll say that you should prefer this one, the one on the top, where you'll have integer square bracket again, then the name of your array followed by assignment, then new, and then this is how you will assign the space. You'll say integer square brackets 10 and 10. That means you're creating a two-dimensional array with 10 rows and 10 columns. Alright, so once you have done this thing, now later on you can use your two-dimensional array just like one-dimensional array, but here Since you have two dimensions, then you need to specify those two. As an example, if you have to assign some value to the first element of your two-dimensional array, then you should say something like this: matrix 0, 0 is equal to 3. Pay attention to the fact that we have this index, which will specify the number of rows we have, and the second index, which will specify a number of columns. So here, when we are saying 0, 0, that means we are referring to the first row and the first column, and for that element we want the value to be assigned as 3. Okay, so now let's have a look at a piece of program. Actually, we will write the complete program, in which case and in this program we are assigning the value to each element of our two-dimensional array as some random value. Okay, it's a random integer value whose value should be in the range starting from 0 till 1000, but 1000 would be excluded, and it's an integer value. Okay, so this is how we can write simple programs involving two-dimensional arrays. Let's understand two-dimensional array even better. So we have this array called matrix, and it's an integer array, and its size is 5 by 5. So when you declare a matrix or create as well, and that matrix array, and you specify its size as 5 and 5, and you say that it is an integer one, then that means you will have 5 rows and 5 columns. Okay, so the first dimension that you have in a two-dimensional array specifies the number of rows that you have in your two-dimensional array, and the second dimension that you have specifies the number of columns that you have in your array. So here it's 5 by 5, and pay attention to the indices. How do we number the index? Same way as we had done in case of one-dimensional array. It will start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it should be, the maximum index should be 4, for the reason that the length is 5. We have 5 rows, so the row index will start from 0, goes all the way till 4, which is 5 minus 1. Similarly, for column, we will have index starting from 0, it goes all the way till 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so that's how a two-dimensional array named matrix will be created when you declare it as int bracket bracket matrix, and then you'll write matrix is equal to new int 5 and 5. Okay, good. So now let's have a look at this second statement. When you're saying matrix 2 1 then is equal to 7, what does that mean? Well, that means you're referring to an element in this matrix array, which is two-dimensional. Its row index has to be 2, which means you will come this way: 0, 1, and 2. So 2 is your row index, and then after that it is specifying that your column index is 1, which means this is 0 and 1. So in the second row means the row with the index, with the row index 2, and the column with the column index 1 is the place where we will put the value as 7. So this is something we need to understand. For every value that we have in the two-dimensional array, we need the corresponding row index as well as the column index. So if you want to put some value in this cell, so you need to specify its row index, which is 3, and its column index, which is 3. So if you say matrix 3 is equal to 12, then 12 would be assigned to this specific position. Okay, so that's about how we have to take care of row index as well as the column index when we are dealing with two-dimensional array. Okay, now let's see what are we doing in the example on the right. So this example is showing how can we declare and initialize the value as well for a two-dimensional array. We have done something like this in one-dimensional array, which was very simple. Here also it is simple only, but we need to pay attention. Like how should we initialize a two-dimensional array? So you will say int two square brackets array is equal to, now we'll be using the curly braces the way we had done in one-dimensional array, but here it has to be a little different. So after that, you should notice that in each row that we have here, we have again curly braces. So this set of curly braces that you have in the top is assigning the first row. The second set with the corresponding curly braces, which encloses 4, 5 and 6, will assign the second row to the two-dimensional array. Similarly, 7, 8 and 9, which are there in the third set of curly braces, will assign the values 7, 8 and 9 to the row number 3, which is index 2. And similarly, you have 10, 11 and 12, which will assign the values to our last row, which is at index 3. So that's how this array would be initialized as well. You're declaring as well as initializing. So this is how you'll do that with two-dimensional array. Now, once we understood these concepts, let's look at the other important concept, which is about the length. So in case of the one-dimensional array, whenever you said array.length, you got the number of elements which were present in the array. It was the case with one-dimensional array. But here we are dealing with two-dimensional arrays. So it has two dimensions. It has number of rows and it has number of columns. So how should I find out the number of rows in my array? So when you say matrix.length, then this length will always return the number of rows that you have in your two-dimensional array. Okay, only the number of rows. But when you want to find out the number of columns, then you need to specify that with a square bracket. So the Java asks you to specify like which columns do you want to find? Do you want to find the columns for the first row, or the columns of the second row, the columns of the third row, or whichever? So you need to specify this thing in the index. You should say matrix 0.length. So that way you are saying that you are asking Java to return the length, the number of columns in the first row. Okay, so for column you have to provide this index always. You would wonder why? Because you'll find an interesting thing in the next slide, which is the fact that Java allows you to have different number of columns in different rows. So if that is the case, then providing this index is a lot meaningful. You should always tell the Java, like you should specify which row you are referring to when you are saying how many columns I have. Okay, so I will do some demo, and from those demos I believe you will understand what I am trying to tell you in this slide. Now let's see how can we interpret this two-dimensional array. So here we have x. It is being declared as int two pair of square brackets, then x is equal to new int 3 and 4. So here you should try to understand, when somebody has declared it like this, then how many rows we have and how many columns we have. So the first dimension will specify the number of rows. So we have 1, 2, 3 rows. Now the second information that we have, the second size that we have here, will specify how many columns do we have in our two-dimensional array. So here it is 4. So that means you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means all the rows in your two-dimensional array X are of 4 column length. Okay, so if you have declared your X, which is a two-dimensional array, in this way, and you want to print x.length, then it will return the number of rows, which is 3. And if you want to find out the number of columns that you have in the first row, then for that you should say x0.length. If you say x0.length, then it will return 4 because there are 4 columns in the first row of x. Now if you say x1.length, then that means you are interested in finding out the number of columns in your second row, which again is 4 here. And when you do x2.length, then again you should be getting 4 because you have 4 columns in the third row as well. Great. Now let's see what do we have here. So in this slide we have the explanation for an example that we have seen in the previous slide, where we are not only declaring a two-dimensional array, we are also creating and initializing its values. So how does that work? You will have to specify int square brackets, 2 of those because it's two-dimensional, array is equal to, now you'll have outer curly braces and a semicolon, and then you should specify the elements for each rows. So in the, how do you specify the first row? You should say curly braces 1, 2, 3. So that will define your first row, comma, and then you will start the curly braces again, and here you have elements 4, 5 and 6. That defines your second row. Then you have 7, 8 and 9, each separated by a comma, and all these are in curly braces, a comma again, and then you have the elements for the last row. Now if you want to really understand what's going on behind the scene, how Java is able to do it, then this is equivalent to doing something like this. Okay, what does that mean? First you need to create an array which is two-dimensional, and it's integer two-dimensional array. So that could be done by using int pair of square brackets array is equal to new int 4 and 3. You're saying that it has 4 rows and 3 columns. Okay, and once it has been done, then you should initialize the values. Alright, so if you don't want to use this way, then you'll have to do all these assignments. What are these assignments? Well, once you have created this two-dimensional array, then by default it should have the value 0 for every element. For these 12 cells that you have in this two-dimensional array, they all should have value 0. What you're doing here, the first element that you have which has the index 0 and 0, you're putting 1 over there, and then for the second you're putting 2. For the third element in the first row, so these are all first row, okay, because 0, 0 and 0, these are all first row. First row, first column, first row, second column, first row, third column. So you have assigned those values as 1, 2, 3. So this is equivalent to this assignment. Similarly, now you'll go to the second row. Second row means the index 1, 1, 1. That's the second row, first column, second row, second column, second row, third column. So you're explicitly doing this assignment. You're saying second row, first column 4, second row, second column 5, second row, third column 6. You go on doing it. So basically in this slide we have these two. We are explaining this assignment, like how will this assignment work out, right? So these two are equivalent, and I'll suggest that whenever you have to do something like this, better use this expression, because this is easier and more readable and self-explanatory as well. Okay, now let's see, when you have done something like this, where you are creating a two-dimensional array with the assignment, what will happen if I call the length at different level? So if you say array.length, then that means you are finding out the number of rows. Okay, so here you should get 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if you say array.length, then output should be 4 because you have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. If you say array0.length, that means you are asking the Java to tell the number of columns in the first row. So here number of columns are 1, 2, 3. So you should get the value 3 for this statement. When you say array 1 dot length, that means you want to find out the number of columns that you have in the second row, which again is 3 here. Similarly, if you say array 2 is in square bracket, so you're specifying index as 2 dot length, again you should get 3 because you have 3 columns here. Array 3 dot length, again you should get 3 because every row in this array has same number of elements, which is 3. Okay, so no surprise. Interesting thing is right here. When you attempt to do arrays 4 dot length, you should get an exception which says arrays index out of bound exception. This is something we really need to understand. Like, why did it happen? You were fine when you did not specify any index. Well, in that case, you found out the number of rows that you had, which is 4. Then later on, you started putting on some index value in the square brackets, and you were able to find out the corresponding number of columns in each row. But what went wrong here when you said array 4 dot length? Well, you got an exception because, see, the number of rows that we have here is 4, and the index starts from 0, 1, 2, 3. So these are the only 4 indices which are allowed for us in for the rows. We cannot use index 4 because its size is not 5. The number of rows are not 5. We have only 4 rows. Okay, so any attempt which is made to access the 5th row of this array will result in an exception because we don't have the 5th row. And when you say array 4 dot length, that means Java will interpret it as that you are asking for the length of your 5th row. Index 4 means 5th because we are starting index from 0. So this was the first row, second row, third row, fourth row. When you say array 4, that means you are asking for the 5th row which does not exist in your array. Okay, so you get the exception. You should try it out, and it's very important concept. Alright, now let's see an interesting array. Okay, so this is what I was telling you, that two-dimensional arrays can have different number of columns in different rows. This is something that Java allows. This is not possible in C. Okay, so this is something very interesting I found in case of Java, and these kind of arrays are called ragged arrays. So let's see, what do we have here? Okay, so you have a matrix which is a two-dimensional array, and we are initializing this array, creating as well as initializing. So we are following the same approach. But interesting thing is that look at the number of elements that I have in the first row. Well, before we do that, let's find out how many rows do we have. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So we have 5 rows in this matrix. Now see, the first row has 5 elements, the second row has 4 elements, third row has 3 elements, fourth has 2 and fifth has just 1 element. Okay, so that is possible. So if you have created an array in such a way that it has different number of columns in each row, then this kind of statements make a lot of sense. So when you're saying just matrix dot length, you're not using any square bracket. So that means you are asking Java to provide the number of rows that you have in two-dimensional array. Okay, so when you print out matrix dot length, you should get the value as 5. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. We have 5 rows. Okay, great. Now when you say matrix 0 dot length, that means you are asking Java to tell you how many columns do we have in our first row. 0 means the first row. Index 0 means the first row. So you are asking how many columns do we have in the first row. So here it is 5. That's what you should get. Right? Here when you change the index from 0 to 1, that means you are asking Java for how many columns you have in the second row. So you get 4. When you change the index to 2, that means you're asking for number of columns in the third row, which is 3. Fourth row is 2. The fifth row is just 1. Okay, now it should make a lot of sense. The fact is that you should ask the Java to provide you the number of columns in a specific row. Okay, so this square bracket is important. Okay, so you'll realize these things as we do more practice. You'll be doing practice in your labs and also in your homework. You will realize the importance of this thing. And this is very interesting thing actually. The previous example could be interpreted in a different way also, and it's a very interesting and very important interpretation of a two-dimensional array. So what does that mean? So here it means that this two-dimensional array is the array that we have can also be interpreted as a one-dimensional array. Okay, so what is this dimension? In this dimension we are holding the information about rows. So I'm saying I have one row here, first row, second row, third row, fourth row, and fifth row. And what do I have in each row? I have another one-dimensional array. Okay, so if you forget about other elements and only look at this row, which in fact are the values between the starting and closing curly braces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you only consider this row, then that's one-dimensional array. Only this much, that's one-dimensional array. Okay, and its reference is kept in the first row of your triangle array. Alright, similarly 1, 2, 3, 4, if you only consider the second row, ignore the first row and the remaining rows, then this is one-dimensional array. Okay, so that's what we are showing in this figure. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is again a one-dimensional array, but it has been referenced in the second row of triangle array. Alright, similarly this 1, 2, 3 that you have is again a one-dimensional array, but it has been referenced by the third row of triangle array. 1 and 2, if you only consider 1 and 2, forget about the last row, forget about the previous rows, then just 1 and 2 in itself, which are in between the starting and closing curly braces, is a one-dimensional array, but it has been referenced by the fourth row of the triangle array. And the last element is one-dimensional array with just one element. Okay, so this is slightly complicated concept, but I am trying my best, and I will try to explain this better with the help of an example in my office hours. And if you have questions, please let me know. But I'll reiterate this fact that the two-dimensional array, like this is a two-dimensional array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows and different number of columns in each row. So two-dimensional arrays are also treated as a one-dimensional array. So this is one-dimensional array where each element of this one-dimensional array is a reference to another one-dimensional array. Okay, so one more time I'll say triangle array is a one-dimensional array where each element, like this first element, is a reference to another one-dimensional array which has 5 elements. And this one-dimensional array, its second element is a reference to another one-dimensional array which has 4 elements. Its third element is a reference to another one-dimensional array with 3 elements. Fourth reference is to an array of 2 elements. The fifth element is a reference to another one-dimensional array with just 1 element. So I don't think this understanding will come in your way of writing a program for two-dimensional array, but this is an interesting concept that I believe you people should be familiar of. Okay, now let's move on and look at more examples. Like when you learned about two-dimensional array, then how can we do these things which we have been doing with one-dimensional array? So what is this program about? Well, here It's the same, I mean, extension of the one-dimensional array program where we had created a one-dimensional array, and we were getting the value for the elements of that one-dimensional array from the user. Here we have two-dimensional array. So how do we go about it? We will declare it like this: int matrix, two square brackets, is equal to new integer 10 and 10. That means we are creating a 10 by 10 matrix. You should have noticed something right here, which is the fact that we have these square brackets after the variable name. Ideally, we would like those to be next to the integer. So in Java, I would ask you people to do it differently. I'll ask you to put int, then square bracket, matrix, and then you should have new int 10 and 10. But this will work too. Okay, and after that we are creating an input object which is of type scanner class, and the purpose of input is to take the values from the user for these elements, for the elements in this 10 by 10 array, which is matrix. Here you are printing the number of rows and the number of columns that you have in matrix. How do you do that? Well, for rows you will simply say matrix dot length, okay, and for columns you'll say matrix 0 dot length. And here, for the fact that every row has the same number of columns, okay, we are fine. It will have the same number of columns in each row. It's not the ragged array as we had in the previous slides. Okay, good. Now fine, you created an array, okay, 10 by 10, it's integer 10 by 10 array. Now you should ask the user to give the value. Now this is interesting, and this is something I would like you people to really practice. Although this is simple, but this will help you in understanding the operations in two-dimensional array. Very, very simple, but very important. So what are we doing here? You are saying for int row is equal to 0, row is equal to matrix dot length, row plus plus. Then you need nested for loops. Why? Because for every element that you have in a two-dimensional array, we have two indices, the row index as well as the column index. Okay, so when you're assigning the value, what is that? Now pay attention to this statement. Or let's start with the right hand side, because that's something we really understand. What is input? A scanner object, and we will say input.nextInt. That means you're asking the user to input some integer from the keyboard, and we will grab that, and it is to be assigned on some variable on the left hand side. Okay, so we should be fine with the right hand side of this assignment. What do we have on the left hand side? This is interesting. Matrix, which is our two-dimensional array. We want to put this value, and for this value we should find out its row index and column index. Okay, it's two-dimensional array. We need row index as well as the column index. So you'll say matrix, row and column. But what are the values that row and column is taking? For that you'll have to look at your nested for loops. And how did we write it? Now we will try to understand why did we write it this way. So your row index is starting from 0, it goes till the number of rows that you have -1. Okay, so it will start from 0, will go all the way till 9. Okay, and when you are on 0, let's try to understand for the first row. If you understand the first row, the rest would be simple. How about columns? Your column index is starting from 0 and it goes all the way till the columns you have -1. So this will again go from 0 all the way till 9, not 10. Okay, fine. So when you had picked the row is equal to 0, you'll get in, and then the column would be 0. So for the first element you'll have row as 0, column as 0. So that means the first element, the value that the user is providing will go in the row index 0, column index 0. Okay, and then after getting that value, you'll come back to this inner for loop and your column will change. So from 0 the column will become 1 now, but our row is still 0. So the next element will go in row 0, column 1. That means the second column of the first row. Okay, so you keep on doing it and your column will go all the way till 9. And in this first iteration, in this first pass of the for loop for column, you will be able to get all the elements for the first row. First row means a row means index 0. So when this for loop completes, that means when the column hits 9, and after that when it is 10, you will come out of this for loop. You will have the element for the first row, which is index 0. And after that, you come back to this for loop and row increases to 1. And then you run this for loop again and you'll get the elements for the second row, then for the third row, then for the fourth row, so on till all the 10 rows. Okay, so that's how you'll get the value from the user for your 100 elements. Here you should have 100 elements because you have 10 rows and 10 columns. Interesting. Now what do we have here? Well, just like the way we were having in one-dimensional array, here we are assigning the value to our 10 by 10 array by some random values. Okay, so the same logic goes behind it also. You will have two for loops the way you had earlier, but now your assignment is with the random variable. Okay, so again, I'm highly encouraging you people to please write these programs and gain some confidence. If you're stuck, please let us know. Okay, but do practice, then only you will understand how to work with two-dimensional arrays. We should be careful about the fact that we have to take care of row index as well as the column index, and we should practice how we have to write these nested for loops. So for two-dimensional arrays, nested for loops are very important. We have just two, but that's okay. Okay, now what do we have here? Well, if you have to print your two-dimensional array, how should you print it out? Because for every element you need to specify its row index as well as its column index. Okay, so yeah, hopefully you got it. You have to have nested for loop. The outer for loop in most of the cases will take care of row index, whereas your inner for loop will take care of your column index. So you'll say for int row is equal to 0, row is less than matrix dot length row plus plus, and then in your curly braces you'll write another for loop for column. For int column is equal to 0, column is less than matrix row dot length, okay, column plus plus, system dot out dot print matrix row, you need to specify row index and then the column index, and these two should go in the square brackets because these are index values. Alright, and now this is very important. I have seen in my past semesters that the students, they try to print two-dimensional array, everything is fine, but the output doesn't look like two-dimensional array. Reason? They miss it out. Okay, so this is an important statement that you should have, which will help us in printing a two-dimensional array such that it looks like a two-dimensional array. If you don't have this statement, you'll have all the values printed in one line. You don't want that. You want the first row to be printed in one line, and then you would like to feed one line here. So this system.out.println statement which we have outside this inner for loop is making sure that every row is printed on a different line. Okay, so that was about printing. Let's look at this program. What are we doing here? Well, just like the way we were doing, we wrote a program which was finding out the sum of all the elements in the one-dimensional array. Now we are a little more ambitious. We want to find out the total of all the elements in our two-dimensional array. Same concept, simple concept, but now we need to think about rows as well as column. We need to sum all the elements. Okay, so how do we go about it? Let's have the total initialized as 0 for the same purpose, because we will be keeping we'll be storing the addition, the sum value after each addition in a variable. So that's the total here. Start with the row index with 0, goes till the length. We'll do row plus plus, and similarly for the column also. And then how are we adding all the elements? Total plus is equal to matrix, row index, and column index. Okay, just like the way we had in one-dimensional array, but now we have two-dimensional arrays, so we should be careful. Okay, so this is slightly different, and right here we were summing all the elements, but the program right now that we have is slightly different and slightly difficult also. So here we want to find out the sum of each elements by column. That means you want to find out how the sum of all the elements in column 0, sum of all the elements in column 1, column 2, column 3, so on and so forth. So it's column wise sum. Okay, so how should we do about it? Well, now you'll have to change the order of these two index. Okay, so since it is column wise sum, you want to find out the sum of the column 0 elements, sum of the column 1 elements, column 2, and here for each column your row index has to vary from row 0 to all the rows. Okay, so how do we do it? Your column index starts from 0, it goes till the number of columns that you have, one less, column plus plus. And here this total variable that you have, it should go inside this for loop, and it should be initialized to 0 because you are calculating this, right? You will have these values, you'll have multiple values. Okay, so if you have 10 columns, it will result in 10 summations being computed, and each summation is for one column. So for that reason we will initialize total to 0 in all the columns. Okay, so we have that 0 for the first column. Now how do we take care of every element in the first column? Now you have to make use of the row in a row variable, which is the row index in fact. So you'll start with int row is equal to 0, row goes to matrix dot length, and you should be knowing that matrix dot length means the number of rows that you have. Okay, so it will go from 0 till the maximum number of rows that you have, and you keep on adding the elements to this total variable which was initialized to 0 just outside this for loop. Okay, now to this you're adding the elements plus matrix, row, and column. All right, so there are a lot of interesting things that I want you people to think about. Program it and think about it. Have a look at it, go back and write the program yourself. If you're stuck, come back to it and try to reason yourself. Okay, so interesting thing that I want to highlight is that although you have changed the order of the column index and the row index, but the way you are using it is the same, which is row and column. You do not change column and row. You have to keep row and column. Alright, this is interesting. You need to understand. Okay, please try to understand. We have changed the order of the for loop. In our earlier example, we were keeping the for loop with the row outside and the column for loop inside. But here we have changed that order. Why did we change? Because our problem is such, we are saying that we need to find the sum column wise, so the column index has to go out, but the way we are accessing the element will remain the same. It will be row and column, not column and row. Okay, so I hope you understand this thing. All right, okay, and then once you have this total, just print it out. All right, so this is again something which we have inside this for loop, inside these curly braces. So for every column you will get the corresponding column sum. Okay, so it was a very interesting problem. Okay, so lecture wise I am done. I will try to do some demo for you people, and I highly encourage you to try multi-dimensional arrays, write some programs. Okay, so let me start with some interesting two-dimensional array problems. So what should I do? Okay, so let's start with an two-dimensional integer array. I should call it my array is equal to. So see what I'm doing. What is my array? It's a two-dimensional integer array. How do I know that? Because I'm saying integer, one pair of square brackets, one dimension, and another one for two dimensions. So since I have 1 and 2 pair of square brackets, so it's my two-dimensional array, and the type is integer. Alright, good. So now I'm doing I'm declaring, creating as well as initializing in one statement. So how should I do that? Well, I will have 1 row, 2 row, and 3 row. Okay, for third I don't need this comma. Alright, let's put some values there. So that means in the first row I have the values 1, 2, 3. In the second row I'll have 3, 4, and 5, and 6, 7, and 8. Alright, so I did create a two-dimensional integer array. I'm calling that my array, and it has 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, and 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. Well, let me do this. 11, 22, 33. So just to now what I did, I added some values. The purpose was simple. I want to keep the number of rows and number of columns different. So here I have 3 rows and 4 columns. So that was my intention. I did not want to keep it 3 by 3, 3 rows and 3 columns. Great. So fine, it has been created. So what else should I do? Let me write a method the way we have done. But this method is very simple. Public static void and print array. Alright, but now see, this is not a simple one-dimensional array, so I should do it this way. ARR. Okay, so I should, since I will be passing my array and its type is two-dimensional int array, so I should declare my former argument in the same way. Alright, so how do I print it out? For int I equals 0, I is less than ARR dot length. Okay, I plus plus. For, well, you know what, I should not call it I should call it row, because row is more meaningful. And here I'll say int call means column is equal to 0, call is less than. Now here you should be careful. ARR 0, sorry about that, 0 dot length. Okay, and I'll say call plus plus, sorry about that, I should not say array 0, I should say row. And why am I doing that? It will be clear very soon. Okay, so what I'll say system dot out dot println printf. I want to try some formatting, So that's the reason I'm saying %3d, and I should say ARR row and column. Okay, let me print it out. I want to show you a few things for that reason. Let's learn the stuff. Okay, so I will say I've already used Java C to dim array.java. Okay, we'll say Java to dim array. Okay, why? Well, the reason why I did not get anything as output is that I did not call this method. I need to call this method in my main method. So let me write it here and say my array. You need to call this method. Till now I had just created this method and I did not call it. You need to call that in the main method. Okay, so Java okay, so what did you get? You get 1 2 3. One, two, three, and 11. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, sorry about that. I'm actually running the wrong program. Let me try that one more time. Java 2. Okay, yeah, see, there's nothing wrong, right? I'm getting 1 2 3 11, 1 2 3 11, then 3 4 5 22, 3 4 5 22, 6 7 8, and 33. So that's what I was mentioning. The students, they don't realize that thing, and it's very common. So what do you need to keep? You need the system.out.println. So if I try all those things, I need to compile again. Now I got it, what I was looking for. 1 2 3 11, 3 4 5 22, 6 7 8, and 33. Okay, so very simple stuff we have done. Just printed it out. Now let me try some interesting thing. Okay, what is that interesting thing? I will change the number of elements that I have in each row. I should say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So this is my ragged array. Okay, so let's compile this and run as well. Cool, it worked. Alright, why did it work? It worked for the reason that my program is very general. What do I mean by my program being general? Because I'm not doing any hard coding anywhere at all, right? So what do I mean? Well, I'm saying that the row index that I have here should go from 0 till all the way till the number of rows that I have. How do I find out number of rows? By calling arr.length. So I'll get value as 1 2 3 4. I have 4 rows. Okay, so I'm taking care of that. I haven't written any constant value like 5 2 3. No, I'm finding the number of rows right here from whatever you pass on to me. Okay, so that's one thing. Pay attention to the other for loop that I have, the inner one. In the inner one, my column starts from 0 and column goes for every row I am finding out the number of columns. Okay, so this highlighted thing which I have like arrays row dot length. So in every for every row value that I get, if I get row as 0, it will find out row 0 dot length, which will be 2, because I have 2 elements in the first row. Second time when row has the value 1, it will be arr1 dot length, and it will find out the value as 1 2 3 4. So for the second case I'll get 4. So because of this fact that I have written this as arr row dot length, and row is something which is the row index, I will be able to find out exactly the number of columns that I have in a specific row. So that's how we should be writing it. Okay, so I should stop right here. There are some other interesting problems also which we might do in, in labs or in homeworks or in my office hours. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you so much.